Shalom, shalom. So, if you know me, you know I love old Hollywood stories of the glamorous and golden age. And this is a story I don't see getting repeated much. So, I thought I'd take a stab at it and hopefully share my thoughts and what I think is something that doesn't get talked about enough. Shirley MacLaine is someone who doesn't really need any introduction. She is a very highly regarded and distinguished actress who has had so many achievements from decades upon decades upon decades. Most notably, the movie Terms of Endearment, which she won an Oscar for. I could go on about how big of a figure she was and has been. But as with many of these kinds of people who are so big in stature when it comes to their careers, they often have eccentric lives behind the scenes, and Shirley MacLaine was no exception. Shirley MacLaine's daughter, Sachi Parker, did write a memoir about growing up being the daughter of Shirley MacLaine and the childhood the actress put her through. And it is quite a story. I actually read this book quite a number of years ago. To preface the story Sachi gives, Shirley MacLaine has always been known for her very unusual beliefs. She very much falls into the school of New Age spiritualism and has always talked about her beliefs of what is beyond our realm or universe or whatever you might want to call it. She actually got into a decent amount of trouble when she released a series of spiritual self-help books in which her beliefs were put under a lot of scrutiny for being just downright ludicrous, insane, conspiracy theory, and offensive in many ways. Most notably saying what happened to the Jews when it came to the Holocaust was a result of them having done something in a past life. So, in a lot of ways, her beliefs, or I should say the craziness of them, very much matched the ridiculousness of what Kanye has espoused. And I think the reason Shirley never really got canceled or lost her career was, well, one, she was already very old when she started writing these books, so obviously she had a whole other lifetime of achievements that was cemented in legacy status, so you couldn't really do too much damage to her. And also these books were released before the internet, so that has a decent amount to do with why her career remained intact. And she's pretty much sort of retired by now. But also her interest in the world beyond our world, what could be lying beyond our public consciousness and knowledge of what science cannot explain, has gone back to very much her early adulthood. And Sachi Parker explains the insane reality her mother and her father lived that resulted in a very tumultuous childhood. Shirley met her husband in the 1950s in New York City. Stephen Parker also had always been very much interested in the world beyond, spiritualism, science that cannot be explained by conventional science. He believed in aliens and government cover-ups and, well, I guess you could say, think of the show Ancient Aliens combined with QAnon. That very much was his beliefs a long time ago. For example, he gave Shirley a book called A Dweller of Two Planets, which was a book that was channeled to a person named Frederick Spencer Oliver, but actually was dictated from a Tibetan spirit who was inhabiting the lost continent of Atlantis. You get the gist of what he followed, and he pulled Shirley into that. They married, but from day one, they always had a very unconventional marriage and life together, or I should say life apart, because Shirley was busy making movies in Los Angeles, and Stephen Parker was busy doing business in Japan. What business that was, actually, Sachi Parker never really knew what that was. Sachi Parker was born in 1956. At the age of 2, she was sent to live with her father in Japan. Even Sachi's existence, the way it came about, is also very strange and just shows how her parents, the couple, really lived life on a whole different plane than what anyone would consider a normal, healthy environment. Even Sachi's name is very strange. Not the sound of it, I don't mean that. So her full name is Stephanie Sachiko Parker. Stephanie just came from her father, Stephen. Sachiko is a Japanese name, and she was living in Japan from a young age, but she is not ethnically Japanese. The name Sachiko came about for reasons not really known. Her father claimed he encountered a young Japanese girl who got cancer from the Hiroshima bombings, and her name was Sachiko. And that girl died, and he decided to name his daughter after that girl. But that story turned out to be false, so it's not really known why her parents decided to add Sachiko into her first name, other than just maybe to possibly fit in a little bit better in Japan. But either way, she went by Sachi all of her life. So Sachi grew up primarily with her father in Japan, and her father, Stephen Parker, was very abusive. He molested her, he was emotionally abusive, and she was neglected. She was pretty much left in the care of nannies and parents of her friends. Again, Sachi never really knew what her father did for a living, and in fact, what he did would be revealed later in a terrible internal family scandal. But also, even though her father hated her, he did rely on her a little bit because he never actually learned Japanese. And since she was living in Japan since age 2, she picked up the language and would help him translate when it came to socializing with his friends. Sachi longed for a relationship with her mom, Shirley, and she would only see her mom on vacations to Los Angeles. Those visits with her mom would be very short, and her mom would lose interest and then move on, and she would be sent away. Sachi also developed a talent for acting at a very young age. In fact, on a visit to Los Angeles to see her mom, Shirley was talking with the people who were making the movie To Kill a Mockingbird, and Sachi happened to have a chance to audition for the role of Scout, and they wanted to give her the role, but Shirley wouldn't have it. Eventually, Sachi was sent to a boarding school in Europe to finish her education. At the boarding school, she felt further neglected by her parents. For example, they were supposed to pick her up for Christmas vacation, and nobody came. The school shut down for Christmas vacation, so she was kicked out. So she ended up hitchhiking across Europe until she made it to Yugoslavia, where she found out her parents were looking for her but didn't know where she was. While she did have some good moments with her mother, Shirley could be very ice cold. For example, there was a story in which Sachi and her friend were going to be spending the time with Shirley in New York, but it turns out their tickets for their connecting flight were lost, and Shirley accused them of having sold them for something. Neither her or her friend knew what happened to them, so Shirley locked them in their hotel rooms until one of them confessed. Eventually, they just lied and said they did sell them for something, even though they hadn't, just so they could get out of their rooms and eat. But the worst moment of betrayal Sachi felt was when she graduated high school. She had ambitions to continue her studies at college, but Shirley told her, "What do you mean studies at college? You have to pay for that on your own. You're on your own now completely, and you have to make your own way." Sachi was heartbroken. She thought her parents were going to cover her continuing education. Sachi remembers thinking, what was the point of all those extremely expensive boarding schools that had high regarded education just for it to go to waste? Sachi, on her own with no inheritance and no financial support, took a series of menial jobs. She bounced between America and Japan, primarily working as a waitress. Eventually, she landed in Australia and became a flight attendant. During this time as a flight attendant, she would find it very difficult because sometimes her mother's movies would play on the plane. Sachi would also find herself in a string of abusive relationships. In the meantime, she would try to remain in contact with her parents but found it difficult, especially her father. After leaving another abusive relationship and hitting a breaking point with her father, she reunited with Shirley, and they eventually had a very long discussion. Shirley then revealed the most horrifying secret to Sachi. All this time, throughout the last few decades, Shirley believed the man who was claiming to be Stephen Parker, who had partially raised Sachi, wasn't actually Stephen Parker. She believed the real Stephen Parker, the one she married, was currently on another planet, and the man who looked like Stephen Parker was actually a clone. This was all part of an operation to expose the government. Shirley presented Sachi with a box of evidence, which included telegrams from the real Stephen from another planet. Sachi was horrified and confronted her mother that this was all a big lie. Shirley had been supporting her husband's research while he was on another planet by giving him an allowance of $60,000 a month. Sachi lost it and argued with Shirley until finally she got her mother, the world-famous actress, to come to her senses and divorce Stephen. So what was going on here? I think Sachi was consistently feeling one trauma after another, and all of her issues in adulthood, anorexia, abusive relationship, low self-esteem, spawned from the fact that she kept having to completely squash her emotions down and be in constant survival mode in complete silence. And as for Shirley and her ex-husband Stephen, their issue is they just had too much money. I know it sounds like I'm downplaying what was going on with them, but the truth is they were just living in a totally separate reality, and science and spiritualism became nothing but a playground for both of them. And they didn't realize that because they never had a set of concrete beliefs, it was damaging to the child they were raising. Because they didn't stick by any values, they didn't stick with any priorities, they were so carefree, but yet held themselves in such high regard. They left their daughter to handle a lot of maturity at a young age she shouldn't have. To this day, Sachi and Shirley are estranged. Sachi ended up dabbling in some acting here and there, and now lives a very quiet life. Let me know what you think of all this, and take care.